The elegant dining room of Chez Laurent buzzed with the quiet sophistication of fine dining, crystal glasses catching the warm light of chandeliers, the gentle clink of silverware against porcelain, and the soft murmur of conversations floating over tables draped in crisp white linen. The restaurant prided itself on being one of Beverly Hills' most exclusive establishments, where reservations were booked months in advance and the clientele included Hollywood's elite. What happened next would leave everyone completely speechless. In the corner booth, partially hidden by a decorative screen, sat a man who seemed oddly out of place among the restaurant's usual glamorous patrons. Dressed simply in dark jeans and a plain black sweater, his shoulder-length dark hair slightly tousled, he might have been mistaken for someone who had wandered in from the street. But there was something about his quiet presence, the way he moved with unconscious grace, that suggested depths beneath the unassuming exterior. Keanu Reeves had chosen this particular table precisely because it offered privacy. After wrapping a grueling 6-month film shoot, he craved nothing more than a quiet meal and the chance to decompress away from the public eye. He'd specifically requested the secluded corner booth, hoping to enjoy his dinner without interruption. The restaurant's usual dinner rush was in full swing, servers weaving between tables with practiced efficiency, when the front door opened to admit an unlikely pair of customers. A middle-aged woman with graying hair pulled back in a neat bun entered first, moving slowly to accommodate her companion, a boy of perhaps 12 years old who walked with the aid of forearm crutches, his left leg visibly weaker than his right. The boy, despite his mobility challenges, had an infectious smile and bright eyes that seemed to take in everything around him with wonder and curiosity. He wore his best clothes, a button-down shirt that was slightly too big for his thin frame, and dress pants that had been carefully pressed. This was clearly a special occasion for him. "Mom, this place is amazing!" the boy exclaimed in a voice that carried clearly across the dining room. "Look at those chandeliers!" His mother, Sarah Chen, smiled warmly at her son's enthusiasm. "Happy birthday, Tommy. You deserve the best." From his corner booth, Keanu glanced up from his menu, drawn by the genuine joy in the boy's voice. He watched as the pair approached the hostess station, noting the careful way the mother stayed close to her son, ready to offer support if needed, but allowing him the dignity of moving independently. The hostess, a young woman with perfectly styled blonde hair and a smile that seemed more practiced than genuine, looked up as they approached. Her expression shifted almost imperceptibly as she took in Tommy's crutches and the modest appearance of both mother and son. "Do you have a reservation?" she asked, her tone noticeably cooler than it had been with the previous customers. "Yes," Sarah replied confidently. "Chen, party of 2 for 7:30. The hostess checked her computer screen, her frown deepening. "I see. Yes, here it is. However, I'm afraid there might be a small issue." "What kind of issue?" Sarah asked, concern creeping into her voice. "Well, you see, we have very specific seating arrangements here, and with special needs, it might be challenging to accommodate you properly tonight." Tommy looked up at his mother, confusion replacing his earlier excitement. "What does she mean, Mom?" Before Sarah could respond, a waiter appeared at the hostess station. Rick Morrison was a man in his early 30s who had been working at Chez Laurent for 3 years, and his attitude perfectly matched the restaurant's pretentious atmosphere. His dark hair was slicked back with expensive product, and his uniform was immaculate, pressed to military precision. "Is there a problem here?" Rick asked, his voice carrying an undertone of irritation. "These guests have a reservation," the hostess explained, "but I was just explaining about our seating situation." Rick's eyes swept over Tommy and his crutches with undisguised annoyance. "Ah, I see. Yes, this could definitely be problematic." "Problematic how?" Sarah asked, her voice gaining strength. "My son uses mobility aids, but that doesn't prevent him from dining at restaurants." Rick's smile was condescending and cold. "Ma'am, this is a very upscale establishment. Our clientele expects a certain atmosphere. Having someone with obvious disabilities moving around the dining room with those devices, well, it might make other guests uncomfortable." The words hit like a physical blow. Tommy's face flushed red, and he took a step back, nearly losing his balance. Sarah's arm immediately went around her son's shoulders, protective and fierce. Excuse me? Sarah's voice was dangerously quiet. Are you seriously suggesting that my son shouldn't be allowed to eat here because of his cerebral palsy? I'm not saying he can't eat here, Rick replied with false reasonableness. I'm just saying that perhaps a more family-friendly establishment might be more appropriate. Somewhere that's better equipped to handle special situations like this. From his corner booth, Keanu had been watching the exchange with growing tension. His jaw clenched as he heard Rick's words, his hands tightening on his menu. But it was Tommy's reaction that truly affected him. The way the boy's shoulders sagged, the brightness dimming from his eyes as he absorbed the cruel implication that he didn't belong. This is discrimination, Sarah said firmly. You cannot refuse service to my son because of his disability. Rick laughed, a sharp, unpleasant sound. We're not refusing service. We're simply suggesting that you might be more comfortable elsewhere. Look around. Do you see anyone else here who looks like you two? He gestured dismissively at their modest clothing and Tommy's crutches. This restaurant caters to a very specific clientele. Movie stars, business executives, people of refinement. Having someone stumbling around on crutches, potentially disrupting other diners' experiences. I don't stumble, Tommy said quietly, his voice barely audible but carrying a dignity that made Keanu's heart ache. I've been using crutches for years. I know how to walk properly. Sure you do, kid, Rick said with mock sympathy. But accidents happen, don't they? What if you fall? What if you knock into someone or bump a table? Our guests pay a lot of money for a perfect dining experience. Sarah's face was flushed with anger and humiliation. We are paying customers with a valid reservation. You cannot. Actually, we can, Rick interrupted. Private establishment, right to refuse service. Maybe try McDonald's next time. They're more equipped for situations like yours. The cruelty of the comment made several nearby diners look up from their meals, their expressions ranging from uncomfortable to outright disapproving. But none of them spoke up, content to watch the scene unfold like unwilling spectators to a car accident. Tommy's eyes filled with tears that he tried desperately to blink away. Mom, can we just go? I don't want to eat here anyway. It was those quietly spoken words, the defeat in a 12-year-old boy's voice on what was supposed to be his special day, that finally pushed Keanu past his breaking point. He stood up from his corner booth with fluid grace, his full height impressive as he approached the hostess station. His movement was so quiet that none of the staff noticed him until he was directly behind Rick. Is there a problem here? Keanu asked, his voice carrying a calm authority that immediately commanded attention. Rick turned around, ready to dismiss another interruption, but stopped short when he found himself looking up at one of the most recognizable faces in Hollywood. His mouth opened and closed soundlessly as his brain struggled to process what he was seeing. Mr. Reeves, I didn't realize, Rick stammered. Clearly, Keanu replied coolly. He turned to Tommy and Sarah, his expression softening immediately. I'm sorry you're having to deal with this. I'm Keanu. He extended his hand first to Sarah, then knelt down slightly to shake Tommy's hand at eye level. You're John Wick, Tommy exclaimed, his tears forgotten in his excitement. And Neo, I've seen all your movies. Keanu smiled genuinely. And you're Tommy, and it's your birthday. That's much more important than any movie. Rick, meanwhile, was frantically trying to recover from his shock. Mr. Reeves, I had no idea you were dining with us tonight. If we had known... You would have what? Keanu asked, standing to his full height and fixing Rick with a stare that could have frozen fire. Treated them with basic human decency? Honored their reservation like any other paying customer? Sir, I was just explaining that we have certain standards. Standards? Keanu's voice remained calm, but there was steel underneath. Let me tell you about standards. A standard is treating every person who walks through your door with respect and dignity. A standard is judging people by their character, not their appearance or abilities. A standard is making sure that everyone feels welcome in your establishment. The dining room had gone silent. Every conversation stopped as diners realized they were witnessing something extraordinary. Several people had recognized Keanu, and phones were discreetly being pulled out to record the interaction. What I just witnessed, Keanu continued, was not standards. it was prejudice, discrimination, and cruelty toward a child on his birthday. Is that really the reputation you want for this restaurant? Rick's face had gone pale. Mr. Reeves, please, you don't understand. We have a certain clientele, certain expectations. I understand perfectly, Keanu interrupted. You think that wealth and status give you the right to treat people as less than human. You think that because someone looks different or moves differently, they don't deserve the same respect as everyone else. He placed a gentle hand on Tommy's shoulder. But here's what you missed while you were being cruel to a child. This young man has more class, more dignity, and more grace than you've shown in this entire interaction. He's faced challenges that would break most adults, and he's done it with a smile and an appreciation for life that should inspire everyone who meets him. Tommy looked up at Keanu with shining eyes, standing a little straighter despite his crutches. And his mother, Keanu continued, nodding respectfully to Sarah, is clearly raising an exceptional human being. The fact that she brought him here for his birthday, that she's fighting for his right to be treated with dignity, that's the kind of love and strength that built every good thing in this world. Sarah wiped away tears she hadn't realized were falling. Thank you, she whispered. Rick was looking around desperately, realizing that every eye in the restaurant was on him, and that several phones were recording what would likely become a viral video by morning. Mr. Reeves, please, I think there's been a misunderstanding. The only misunderstanding, Keanu said firmly, is yours. You fundamentally misunderstood what it means to be human. He turned to the hostess, who had been watching the exchange with growing horror. I assume you can seat these guests at your best table? Of course, Mr. Reeves, she stammered. Right away. Excellent. Keanu looked back at Rick. And I assume their meal will be complimentary tonight, given the appalling treatment they've received? Yes, sir, absolutely, Rick replied quickly. Good. And I'd like you to personally apologize to Tommy and his mother for your behavior. Rick looked like he wanted to sink into the floor, but with every diner in the restaurant watching, he had no choice. He turned to Tommy and Sarah, his face burning with embarrassment. I'm sorry, he said awkwardly. My behavior was inappropriate. You're welcome to dine here. Tommy looked up at his mother, then back at Rick. Thank you for apologizing, he said with a maturity that made several nearby diners wipe their eyes. I forgive you. The simple grace of the boy's response seemed to hit Rick harder than any angry words could have. He stood there for a moment, seemingly stunned by the kindness he'd been shown in return for his cruelty. Keanu smiled at Tommy. That's the kind of person you are, isn't it? Someone who forgives, even when you don't have to. Tommy nodded. My mom taught me that holding on to anger just makes you sad. And today's my birthday. I don't want to be sad on my birthday. Wise words from a wise young man, Keanu said. He turned to Sarah. Would you mind if I joined you for dinner? I hate eating alone, and I have a feeling Tommy has some great stories to tell. Sarah's face lit up. We would be honored. As the hostess led them to the restaurant's best table, a prime spot with a view of the city lights, the entire dining room erupted in spontaneous applause. Several diners approached to shake Tommy's hand and wish him a happy birthday, and at least 3 people asked to take photos with the family. Over dinner, Keanu learned that Tommy was an aspiring filmmaker who wrote scripts on his tablet and created stop-motion movies with his action figures. Sarah was a nurse who worked double shifts to support them both after Tommy's father had abandoned them when Tommy was diagnosed with cerebral palsy. He said he couldn't handle having a defective child. Sarah confided quietly while Tommy was in the restroom, as if my son is anything less than perfect. Some people, Keanu said gently, are so broken themselves that they can't recognize strength when they see it. Tommy is one of the strongest people I've ever met. When Tommy returned, Keanu had pulled out his phone. Tommy, I want to show you something. He scrolled to a contact list. I know some people in the film industry. If you're serious about making movies, maybe we could arrange for you to visit some sets, meet some directors and writers. Tommy's eyes went wide. Really? You would do that? Of course. Talent should be nurtured, and you clearly have a creative mind. Plus, Keanu grinned, I have a feeling you'd keep everyone on set honest about what really matters. As the evening wound down, Rick approached their table hesitantly. His earlier arrogance was completely gone, replaced by what appeared to be genuine remorse. "Excuse me," he said quietly. "Tommy, I wanted to apologize again, not because Mr. Reeves is here, but because you helped me realize something tonight." Tommy looked up at him curiously. "What's that?" "You showed me what real strength looks like. I've been working in fancy restaurants for years, thinking that money and status were what made people important. But you faced my cruelty with forgiveness. You have more character than I've ever had." Rick's voice was thick with emotion. "I don't know if I can ever make up for how I treated you tonight, but I want you to know that I'm going to try to be better. You deserve better. Everyone deserves better." Tommy considered this seriously, then smiled. "Everyone makes mistakes. What matters is learning from them." Rick nodded, tears in his eyes. "Happy birthday, Tommy, and thank you for teaching me something I should have learned a long time ago." As they prepared to leave, Keanu made sure that Tommy had his contact information and that Sarah knew she could reach out if they needed anything. The restaurant manager had appeared at some point during the evening to personally apologize and ensure that the Chen family would always be welcome. Outside the restaurant, as they waited for Sarah's car to arrive, Tommy looked up at Keanu with serious eyes. "Mr. Reeves, can I ask you something?" "Of course. Why did you help us tonight? You didn't have to get involved." Keanu knelt down to Tommy's level again. "You want to know the truth? Because a long time ago, I learned that how we treat others, especially people who are different from us, people who might be vulnerable, that's what defines who we are as human beings. And tonight, I saw someone being cruel to a good person on his birthday. I couldn't let that stand." "But you're famous. Weren't you worried about causing a scene?" Keanu smiled. "Tommy, being famous doesn't give you a free pass to ignore injustice. If anything, it gives you more responsibility to speak up when you see something wrong." Tommy nodded thoughtfully. "I want to be like you when I grow up." "No," Keanu said gently. "You be like you. The world needs more Tommy Chens, not more of anybody else." 3 months later, Keanu received a package in the mail. Inside was a handwritten script titled "The Hero Next Door" by Tommy Chen, along with a note. "Dear Mr. Reeves, thank you for the best birthday ever and for introducing me to the director friends who taught me so much about screenwriting. I wrote this script for you, but it's really about ordinary people who choose to be heroes when it matters most. You showed me that night that heroes don't just exist in movies. Sometimes they're sitting in corner booths in restaurants, wearing regular clothes and eating dinner alone. And sometimes they step up when someone needs them most." The visits to the movie sets were amazing, but the real gift you gave me was showing me what it looks like when someone chooses kindness over comfort, justice over convenience. I hope you like the script, and I hope you know that you didn't just save my birthday that night. You showed me what kind of person I want to be. Your friend, Tommy Chen. P.S. Mom says to tell you that she's putting herself through nursing school now, thanks to the scholarship fund you helped her find. We're both doing great. Keanu sat in his living room, reading Tommy's script, which was, remarkably, quite good for someone so young, and felt the familiar warmth that came from knowing that kindness had ripple effects far beyond the moment it was given. 6 months after that night at Chez Laurent, Rick Morrison quit his job at the restaurant and enrolled in a program to become a special education teacher. He later said in an interview that meeting Tommy Chen had changed his entire perspective on what it meant to serve others. The hostess, inspired by what she had witnessed, began volunteering at a local disability advocacy center and eventually became their full-time outreach coordinator. And Tommy Chen went on to become one of the youngest people ever accepted into USC's film school, with a full scholarship and a recommendation letter from one of Hollywood's most respected actors. But perhaps the most important change was the quietest one. Every year on Tommy's birthday, he and his mother returned to Chez Laurent for dinner. Not because the food was exceptional, or because they enjoyed the fancy atmosphere, but because it had become a tradition, a reminder that sometimes the worst moments can become the best ones, depending on who chooses to step up and make them better. And every year, without fail, there was a single red rose waiting at their table with a note that simply said, "Happy birthday, Tommy. Keep being the hero the world needs. In the end, that night at Chez Laurent became legendary, not because a famous actor had intervened, but because it reminded everyone who heard the story that heroism isn't about superpowers or special abilities. It's about choosing compassion over comfort, standing up for others even when it's inconvenient, and recognizing that every person, regardless of how they look, move, or speak, deserves to be treated with dignity and respect.